They are. How are you?
Voila.
Yeah, that's the magic trick, you see.
I know, wait a minute. I don't know now. So I had an interview right before this, but and I thought it was on camera, but it was all it was all, so I thought, oh shit, I put on makeup for nothing, but I guess I didn't.
You look perfect, so.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to meet you.
Nice
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks to you for your time. So, are you ready, or can I offer you?
I'm ready. No, I'm totally ready. Whatever you're ready, I'm ready.
Awesome. So, well, Dreamcatcher is finally coming to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland as well on January 28th.
Awesome.
So, and the great thing is that you don't only star in it, but you're also an executive producer on this. And correct me if I'm wrong, but only 2 movies are out that you actually produced, right? This one and Room for Rent, right?
Also, The Call. I think I'm one of the producers on, which is another one. Mm-hmm. But Room for Rent is my baby. I mean, it was actually almost 2 years ago now, I think, but it was really, that was the first thing that I didn't even know I was producing it, but I was, because well, I was given, I mean, actually, I really, seriously, I mean, because I got very involved in the storytelling part, and it was a very small cast, and, small budget, very small budget. We were all in this kind of one house in Arizona together, and but I really fell in love with the story and was very instrumental in telling the story, which is, I've become more, it's interesting because it's not like, okay, I'm going to be involved in this now, but just, it was sort of coming out of me. I really invested in the character and really kind of loved her in a certain kind of way. And so Tommy Stovall, who directed it, was very open to my suggestions and to my input. And literally, they kind of surprised me. I didn't know I was, that they made me a co-producer. And
wow.
That was really fun for me to be the participant like that.
But the awesome thing about low budget is actually that it kind of forces everyone to be creative when it comes down to how you do certain things, right?
Totally. In many respects, I mean, it's great to be part of a big project, obviously, and but your position in it is very different. I was also in this a Showtime series called LA City of Angels. It was based, the Penny Dreadful producer and creator was the showrunner. And it's quite the opposite, a giant production. I mean, Showtime, it was a series, first of all, which I'd never done. I'd never been part of a TV series. And it was a recurring character. And so I was in 6 of the 10 episodes, but it was very scattered. It was very like I'd work a day and then I wouldn't work again for 3 weeks, or maybe, even longer. Then I'd work another day, maybe 2. So, and it was very scary because it was so vast,
right.
And I would come in sort of like, whenever, it was like, I would get really nervous before the day of work because I didn't feel I was a part of it. Really, I was, but I didn't feel that way. I felt very much like a sort of a little scattered, like a polka dot that would sort of come in and go out. And so, it was a whole different kind of experience. And my sense of security was very different also. I mean, I was really nervous. I mean, I've been doing this for many, many years, but the machinery of this production, talking about the size, and look, this is a big budget. I mean, each episode is probably $10 million. I mean, per episode. I mean, really huge. So, which do I like better?
Combination of both, right?
Well, they're both good. But I think I enjoy, in terms of real enjoyment, I like being more of a participant and feeling more relaxed and in control of my own work. This television is, try it. And John Logan, who was the creator, is extraordinary. I mean, he's a true genius, not using that word lightly. I mean, really extraordinary. And he loves his actors, but it's, you know, like you have a scene, and I was working with Nathan Lane, who I don't know if you know who he is. I mean, he's done everything. I mean, he's a Broadway star. I mean, from forever, and done film, and I mean, he's a huge star. And they were like royalty to me. I mean, I'm like, you know, and so I always felt, you know, we'd be doing a scene, and I had an idea, because that's how I had an idea. So there's time. What's the idea? No. Okay. Or yes. Get a yes or no, and then you move forward. Where, as opposed to something like, you know, Room for Rent, you know, you stop the production, you talk about something, you know, it's a much more casual and less expensive project. Anyway, I didn't mean to get into all that, but that was how I sort of started this little producing thing now that I seem to be part of.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I mean, what I personally love about Dreamcatcher is and I mean, this counts for many of your horror movies, you know, it's the fact that it's, in this case, it's actually, it feels like a family drama, and the horror is like an addition to it. But in its core, it's really like about the people.
Totally. Thank you.
Do you agree with that, right?
Yeah, and I think those are always the best stories. You know, I mean, there's a lot of horror stuff out there that particularly doesn't interest me at all. And it's usually because it's about, you know, what's the next scary thing? What's the next thing you can do to really jar, you know, but you've lost the story in the meantime. And actually, I think that's the reason the Insidious films are so successful, is they're based in family drama. I mean, I watched the first one again, which I hadn't for quite a while. It's a fantastic film. I mean, you know, it's really wonderfully made with wonderful story elements, and it's about this family who, you know, you fall in love with both Patrick and Rose's characters, and so you fall in love with the whole experience. So I agree with you 100%.
You know, sometimes it really annoys me, because I feel that, you know, sometimes I feel like that people have become less patient when it comes down to movies. I see that in my friendships, for example. You know, like 10, 15 years ago, we were just watching movies, and it doesn't matter if it starts slow, because starting slow is important, because otherwise you don't care, right? And then, but in the past few years, I realized that if nothing happens, you know, after like 10
right
years,
away,
they start to get bored, and I'm like, but it's so necessary. You first have to get to know all these characters before you can enter the scary part of the movie. So what do you think, why some people tend to be, you know, less patient?
I think that's a product of now. I think people are less patient because there's so much stimulation all over the place. We're overstimulated. People's forms of expression are shorthand. OMG, LOV, blah, 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 QPG. I mean, I don't even know what any of that, half that stuff means. Never you know, everybody's in a hurry to go nowhere. I mean, no one's going, especially now with COVID, no one's going anywhere. And people's are short. So I really, that's sort of a product of, it's interesting to hear you say that from your, you know, because you're the young generation as well. I think I think young people in general have less patience because everything is this. Everything is the phone. Everything is really now. I want it now. What you know, text. Oh my God, it didn't go through. You know, you got like 4 seconds. You had to wait for something. So people don't have any patience, and that's being accentuated by technology and by almost philosophy. I mean, people are in a hurry for everything to happen. And it drives me nuts, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because the joy of living is to savor the moments in the big picture, not just in movies, not just in reading. It's the big picture. It's learning how to taste something rather than swallow it.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm gonna go. I don't know. I ate it. Well, maybe taste it. Like, see, run it around in your mouth a little. See if it. What is it? Is it sweet? Is it sour? Is it crunchy, or is it a pudding? What is it? I don't know. I ate it. Yeah. I'm done. Where's the next one? What am I going to eat next? I mean, isn't that it?
Right.
That's shitty.
My gosh.
I'm sorry.
That's great. But you know, I feel like the same way about, you know, television series. Sometimes, you know, I miss the times, you know, when you had, you know, one episode every week, because then you had, you know, like an entire week you were able to guess what's going to be happening next. And then these days, sometimes you feel like that people want to binge watch everything just at the time when it comes out, just to be the first one.
I gotta say, really, I gotta get it over with. Can you imagine what sex is like? I mean, sorry, I can barely imagine anymore, but but I can remember. You know, it's like, I mean, it's really sad. I mean, it is. It's really there's plenty of good stuff because of all this stuff. But I really long for the old days. I mean, I was just talking about this. I mean, writing is so much fun. I mean, kids don't even know how to they don't know how to write cursive. It's not being taught in schools. And I was literally remembering learning, because when I was like in first, second grade, learning the capital, because the small letters, you know, the small letter A, and then the capital letter A, you know, and it was different, you know, you had to be able to tell the difference. And I remember learning to write the capital B, which was like this and down, and then you came back and around, and then you make a little thing. And I thought, wow. And that whole thing took longer than it takes to read a book on your laptop. I mean, it's like, but it was I felt like an artist. I remember feeling like I can make it, I could put a little curly Q there too and make it even more beautiful, you know, and it's really, there's been a huge, huge loss with all this technology, as well as, Absolutely. You know, listen, it's never going to go backwards, and it's given us huge amounts of good things. But boy, oh boy, those smaller details of living have really been lost. Kids don't have them at all. They really don't. You know, everything is, you know, I mean, I hate it when I see a mother in the grocery, you know, like she has a baby. Shut the kid up, give them a phone. And that's what they do. You know, these little, you know, they got their little phone, and mommy is good for 10 minutes while the kid is like getting radiation poisoning. Oh my God. You know, sorry, but I mean, you know, and then they wonder why their skin is bad later. I mean, I'm on a rampage. You got me started. Okay, but so what else?
No, but you know, I also miss like the old days, because you know, that's why I have this behind me, you know, my
Your library, which is beautiful.
And I love it so much, you know, I can't get rid of them, because you know, I want my favorites to have, you know, I want them to have physical, right? So,
and there's something about lining them up. I mean, my son is like that too. My son is 30, and so, but his stuff is all, he's a huge reader. I mean, he loves books. And you know, and it's like that. Everything has got, he also plays Magic the Gathering, which is this card game. Yeah. So he's got all, and he's got all, and it's wonderful. It's good for your mind. It's good for your sense of beauty. I mean, those CDs are beautiful. You know, when you have them all put together.
Yeah, totally.
So I understand, and your library behind you is beautiful. I mean, it really is beautiful.
Thank you.
I noticed.
Now you make me blush. No.
Good.
So let's go back to Dreamcatcher.
Really? I'm sorry. I got off track here.
No, it was me. No, but you know, we all know how great you can be in movies, and the same counts for Henry, of course, and for Radha. But let's not forget about Finlay as well. I mean, it's so crazy to see, you know, so young people to pretend to be evil and doing it so believable. It's something that you can't imagine. If I look back, when I was like 12, 13, I couldn't be serious for 1 minute. So it's just so amazing to see him. And sometimes
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, sometimes when I see them in horror movies, it's always so fascinating because, of course I have been to movie sets before, but I've never seen a kid doing so evil scenes, and I imagine, like a director going like, okay, Finlay, now you're going to grab this axe and you're going to hunt down Radha and Henry, it's for me, hard to imagine how that is on set. So maybe you can share that with us.
Well, he really was a real professional. It's kind of shocking for me as well, because his focus, his mother was there, his mom was on set all the time with him. She let him drink coffee, which was kind of weird. It's like she would let him have half a cup of coffee to sort of, it's caffeine is caffeine for a kid too. It still gives them, it's like a little bit of speed, get sort of, but he was so focused, always knew his dialogue and was really professional. And I think there are kids which are really gifted in a certain, it really is kind of a gift, because kids are usually so scattered, and he had infinite patience. I remember the scene where he's on the table and we hog tie him, where I'll tell you, I would have been a wreck. And this kid, because we tied his hand, he had to be lying on his stomach. And, you don't just get one take and you're done. That scene probably took an hour to shoot, that one scene. So he had to be down and we had to put the things around his, and we wanted to make sure they weren't too tight. So he had to pretend they were tight, because he had to pretend he was trying to struggle to get out of it. But you couldn't make them too loose either. They had to be, and I remember was it one of the, I don't know, I can't remember. It was this one woman I didn't like very much. I can't remember. But she kept trying to make him tighter. And I said, this kid is a kid. Leave him. He can pretend. He's good at pretending. Let him pretend it's tight, Yeah, well, you got to wrap it. And, poor little Finn would be going. And I say, who was it? It's good I don't remember. It wasn't Radha. It wasn't the script. It was not the script supervisor. It was somebody who was just wanted it to look, maybe it was anyway. But long story short, he is very good at pretending and believing what's happening. And Carrie, the director, would give him, he would have him do his robot look, because they sort of came up with this thing where when he was in sort of, when he was being channeled, when the demons were channeling through him. So Carrie would sort of came up with this idea of it being, this is your robot look, so he would sort of get into that frame, and he really would find that. And smart and just wonderful. He was wonderful to work with. And there's the scene I have with him, which is in the shop when I first meet him. And then he comes back and I'm showing him how to make the dream catcher, the spirit traps and stuff. And he was great with any improv, anything I would throw at him or come up with an idea. He was totally believed it and went with it. And I remember we did a master shot first, and then we were going to do his close-up. And as a true professional, who, if you don't know how to do a movie, you wouldn't even do this. In the big shot, he was the scene would be played, but when we got to his close-up, you could see him totally pull everything in, take his time with the dialogue. You'd see it all in his face and eyes. It was really impressive. He's a wonderful kid and a wonderful actor. I really loved working with him. So
that's lovely to hear. And acting in a movie is one thing, and watching them as a kid another thing. Sometimes young actors get told, you're allowed to star in the movie, but you're not allowed to watch it afterwards, right? So, we know that they watch them anyways, of course. But it's so, what I feel like is, it's so cool, because all the great filmmakers, like John Carpenter, Jason Wan, James Wan and Jason Blum, they all grew up watching horror movies, and that's what inspired them to tell their own stories as adults. So,
Right, right.
and I mean, I remember how hard it was for me to convince my parents to allow me to watch horror movies when I was like 12, 13 or something, you know. Um, um, and and then once they allowed me, I was happy. I was like, I promise you, I'm gonna go and watch The Lion King, but just let me watch Alien 3 first.
Person.
You know, and you know, but now that I have, you know, like a nephew and a niece that are like 13, 14 years old, I go like, what? You watch that movie? You're not allowed to watch that, you know? So
Right, right.
now I'm like super protective when it comes down to that. So, but what's your opinion on, you know, on kids watching horror movies as long as they can handle them?
I think, I think it's an individual choice. When I grew up, there was nothing. I mean, there was no movie. I mean, the movies we watched I watched Mickey Mouse cartoons. I mean, really, I'm old.
Super creepy
Yeah,
too.
I mean, and I forget I am, but I mean, I grew up doing. I remember the first television. We had the first television on our street. And it was a little tiny. It was not much bigger than a cell phone. I mean, it was like maybe 6 inches by 6 inches, the screen.
Wow.
And my father, it might have been bigger than that, but that's what it seemed like. There was a thing called a magnifier. So what it was a giant, about the size of a the screen that I'm at right now, that was like a fluid, a liquid that magnified the image. So it was like liquid. And you sort of put it onto the screen, onto the television, and then Mickey Mouse, instead of being this big, would be that big.
Oh wow.
And so it was never a question of watching scary stuff. I mean, I was busy outside playing outside and roller skating and riding my bike, and movies were the first movie I think I ever saw was with my mom, and we went to see. You probably don't even know who this is. A comedy actor named Red Skelton, and and it was called The Fuller Brush Man. So check it out. I mean, I'm sure it's online somewhere. The Fuller Brush Man, and it was a comedy, and it was black and white. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to the movies, to the Varsity Theater with my mom and watching The Fuller Brush Man. And so there was none of this there was none of this kind of input, that we have today. There was, the funnies, like the newspaper had funnies, and there were color funnies and black and white funnies. But I think my opinion today is you have to know what your kid can handle. Mm-hmm. And I think they can handle a whole lot more than certainly than we could, because they're growing up with this all around them, and they're growing up a lot faster and more sophisticated. They have phones right away when they're like, little kids. So everything is out there. And I still think it's important, if a kid is watching something scary, especially scary, that you watch it with them. Mm-hmm. Right. See how they react. I mean, that's just that would be a good starting point. If you see something that's really scary, because kids' imaginations are beautiful, but they're vivid, and they stick. I mean, stuff as a kid that was scary still is scary to me in some level. I remember feeling fear, but we had very little, very, very little that I could remember that was from the outside, that was entertainment, that was scary, that my parents even had to think of. So I think my answer to the question, which I'm sorry, I'm being sort of all over the place here, but my answer to the question, I think it's a good idea, if you have a little kid especially, to have rules. Also rules are important. Now, kids they're going to walk all over your rules, and they're going to try and find ways around them. But they should know, when something is PG-13, there's a reason. Not that it's going to affect your kid, but as a parent, you have a responsibility to guide your child and know your child. There's a wonderful woman who's I'm friends with on Facebook and who's a wonderful director. Rebecca McKendry is her name, and she's just great. And she's got 2 kids. I only really know about her family because of Facebook. But her kids, you know, they grew up with skulls and bloody things, and because that's her job. She loves horror films. She loves horror in every way. So, you know, for them, it's kind of like there's no sting in it for them. But you never know what's going to scare a child.
Exactly.
You never really know. I mean, it could be something much different than you think. So just because it's a bloody thing and you explain to them about murder or you explain about someone hurting somebody, I think explanation takes the mystery and the fear away on some level. So I think that's a good guiding place, you know, to watch with your kids and to talk about it, see what they think.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. There's a scene in the movie where we see Josh stealing something from your character Ruth because he believes that it might help him through the nights.
Right.
I was wondering, did you ever had something like that, you know, that made you feel safer, you know, that made you forget the monsters under your bed?
It's a great question. My mom used to crawl in bed with me before I went to sleep.
Oh.
And she would tell me stories. This could make me cry, actually. She would tell me stories about her childhood because she came here from Russia when she was 13 years old. And they were like fairy tales to me because they were about her life when she lived in Russia. So my mind was always filled with kind of history and my dad would tell me, make up what he called Candyland stories that started with a little, he would do it on my window. He'd say, there's a tap on your window. And Linda, he would call me, my name is Linda. He'd say, Linda would look up and there would be a little tiny silver horse with wings. And he would come into the room, the window would open and he would fly in. And this is when I was like 6, 7, 8 years old. Fly in and come on her shoulder and say, you want to come with me to Candyland? And Linda would magically be able to shrink down and jump on his back and they would fly out the window. And then he would say, they went over the Goldman's house. You know, he would have a whole thing. And then they'd fly by the Ratner's house, which was, and he would sort of go through all the houses on the neighborhood. And then they would go up into Candyland. And Candyland, my father was so funny. I didn't know it for years that now I think about it. It was a delicatessen. It was like a deli, Candyland. There were corned beef sandwiches in the trees. And there was, you know, rivers of red pop and soda, and there were dill pickles hanging. So it was really like my father. It was my father's idea of Candyland was like a delicatessen, you know, with sandwiches and corned beef and French dressing on rye bread. And so I guess my mind was not at all on anything spooky. And the only thing I can remember kind of spooky was we used to listen to radio shows, and because this was before television, really. I mean, this was when television, there was nothing on television. I mean, there were 2 shows on and 1 station, and there was a show called Dimension X. There were some horror, like mystery and horror things on the radio, which later actually became TV shows. There was one called Suspense. There was one called Lights Out. And they were all done with sound effects and storytelling, like verbal storytelling. They were scary. They were scary. And I wasn't really supposed to listen to them. But I had a little red plastic radio in my room, I remember. And I would tune into them. And when they'd have footsteps, it would be, you know, and the bad guy, you'd hear the door open, you know, it was like a sound effects studio is what they used. And it's interesting because when you can't see something visually, the auditory part of your brain and your own vision of what it is you make up what you're seeing. You know, everybody would tell you something different probably. Then your real monsters start to, you know, who's at the door, and when the door opens, what came through the door, and you hear, you know, those were scary. So.
Oh, I cannot tell you how much I love this answer. Really, really, so lovely. Really amazing. But speaking of scary stuff, I I remember watching horror movies when my brother still lived here. We watched them all together. And what was always so impressive about horror movies is that, you watch movies, any movies, comedies or thrillers, and
Is
after,
your brother older? Is he an older brother or younger?
yes, he's actually 9 years older than me.
9 years older. Okay.
Yes, yes. And but that makes it even more funny because after watching horror movies, I remember, afterwards he was like, actually, I should go to the kitchen to grab some water. Will you come with me?
So you were protecting your brother. That's great.
So he was always scared, and he would never want to go alone to the bathroom, home, alone at night and stuff.
Right.
But that's what I love about horror movies. It's that if they're really good, they stay with you, and they influence your nights, maybe 3 nights, 2 nights, 1 night, but they stay with you. And even if you know that demons and monsters are it's very unlikely that you will face them around the next corner, but still you go outdoor and you go like, shall I really go, or shall I just go to bed without any water?
Well, right, really. I remember not wanting to have the door closed all the way, I wanted to leave the door open so I could see the light in the hall. So, the idea of being in pitch black, to me was, and it was also kind of a thing about your mom and dad that I knew where they were, they were out there, and I wasn't by myself. So there's that too. I mean, being alone for a child is, I guess, every kid processes that a little bit differently, but you have your imagination then is so vivid, it's easy to transpose, what's that sound? And your mind immediately manufactures somebody out there. It's great acting exercise.
Do you ever, I can imagine that for you as an actress, it's a little bit different because you know how horror movies are made. You are on sets and you see how directors make them and stuff. So does it still happen to you that you keep your lights on when you see a creepy movie?
No, I don't think so. I have a dog and I have a kitty. So
a dog is always a great protector, right?
They are great, but I mean, there's still, and I live on my own, so I'm not at all scared about it. I don't, but you can, if you hear a sound downstairs, or something, it sets up that whole chain reaction of your adrenaline and your imagination and your fear. Listen, there's so much going on in general. It's easy to trigger. I think it's easy to trigger fear, probably easier than, it's like almost childlike. It's easy to trigger that, invaders, people. I mean, people are not very nice in general right now. There's a lot of stuff going on, as we all know. And
exactly.
And I mean, I think it depends on how vivid your imagination is, and people, how much fear you've grown up with. Mm-hmm. And what your circumstances have been and are, I mean, so I think it's a very individual thing. I think it's easy to let your imagination run away with you and get fearful. I mean, but it's true. My doggie, she very rarely does that. I never ever had heard her. In one night she did do, and I thought, oh shit. Like,
because you go like,
I gotta worry about that now. You're right. But gratefully, it was something, something made her growl though. So anyway, I like being safe. I like feeling safe. I don't like being scared like that. It's unpleasant, and your whole body, your physiology changes. I mean, your heart starts pumping, and you can feel prick. I mean, your whole body sort of goes into panic, kind of fear mode. I don't like it.
And we're two. What would you say how much, because you've made a lot of horror movies in the past decades, and it's always so interesting when I, you know, for example, my sister, she watched horror movies when she was a teenager and probably in her early 20s. Now she's almost 50, and she stopped watching horror movies because she didn't enjoy them as much, you know. Well, actually sometimes I tell her watch that one and then she does enjoy it. So sometimes maybe she just believes that she doesn't enjoy them anymore, I don't know. And the other funny thing is that my grandmother actually started watching horror movies at the age of 80. So and yeah, and I was like, because
gotta be better than where she's gonna go later.
I was like, Grandma, you have a lot of movies to watch now that you
That's
started.
hilarious.
Yeah,
That's
because
great.
you know, when I was little and she knew that I was watching these kind of things, she was like, how can you watch stuff like that? And this is so gruesome and that. And then, but then when she started watching them, she was like,
She
oh,
got really into
really
it.
good.
Well, you know, that's a good point. I'm not into gruesome. So I mean, that doesn't, I like a good story. One of the scariest movies that I remember was a movie called Night of the Hunter with Robert Mitchum and Shelley Winters. He plays a preacher who has hate written on one hand and love written on the other. His performance in particular is one of the scariest performance still. I mean, it still creeps me out when I've seen the movie. It's a wonderful movie. It's in black and white, and it's I don't know what year it is, but Night of the Hunter. But I don't like gruesome. I don't need it. To me, that's not scary. You know, it's like Hitchcock. Why he was a master is everything really gruesome is off camera. Even in Psycho, what you see is the blood going down the drain and the curtain. You know, the big shower scene. You don't see anybody get sliced up or diced up and arms flying or whatever. It's what he does is stimulate you to imagine the horror for yourself, and that's always the scariest for each individual. You know, because you never know what's really going to scare.
Imagination, right? Yeah.
Your own imagination is the worst. So I'm not a fan of the, you know, like I didn't really like Cabin in the Woods or any of that, you know, chopping. It just doesn't appeal to me. And I don't find it scary. I just find it gruesome.
You know, it's all pretty much all stuff that is all about the body count, right?
Yep.
Yeah. No, I feel the same. When I was a teenager, you know, I enjoy, you know, this kind of slasher movies, but then, you know, of course, when I arrived in my 20s and 30s, you start to appreciate actually, you know, the stuff with better stories that really are about people, of course.
Right. Because that's the scary stuff to me, is what happens to people, you know, and again, it always boils down to a good story. You know, if the violence and the dismemberment or whatever serves your story, then so be it. You know, then you need that to tell the story. But to just throw it in there, you know, gratuitous stuff is just, you know, there are people that love that and who go to see, that's what they like to see. So there's a market for that. But I find scary much different than that. You know, those invasion films are scary sometimes to me, being, you know,
you're facing the unknown stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of being, you know, being alone in the house kind of thing, but not even so much. I don't think I really know what scares me always. It catches me off guard to be surprised of something and you think about it later, you know, something that plays over and over in your head. That's awful. I mean, I hate when that happens. That's scary. You know, that could be scary to turn off your own imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. Lin, my last question to you will be before it gets March. Of course, all of your fans are very excited that Insidious 5 was announced. And I mean, I mean, it's top secret at this time. So what can you say without making Jason Blum ignoring COVID and storming your house right now?
I actually have no answer because it hasn't been totally figured out. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what part Elise will or won't take in the story. I have an idea for a film, but this is going to be Patrick Wilson will direct this, it's going to become his sort of his deal. So I don't, I only know sort of the idea of the storyline, but I really don't have any real information. That I don't even have it to be able to, you know, to not tell you. I mean, I think we probably, I know Patrick is really busy also. Well, COVID is one thing. And then he's doing Aquaman 2 for James Wan.
Right.
So he's going to be very busy with that. And he's going to direct this. And is also, he's not writing the script, but it's not going to be written by Leigh Whannell. It's got a different writer. So I'm assuming it's will be taking a different, you know, a different tact a little bit. And I mean, I was very thrilled to feel that people love Elise, because I really love her too. I mean, I feel very happy and gratified that the character has become so beloved to people. And
we got to know her so well with all the movies.
Thank you to Leigh Whannell. I mean, what for me, what was exciting when we did the first one, James, I didn't know James very well, and I'd met him because he was a fan of a little film I did called Dead End, which is a terrific horror film if you haven't seen it.
I've seen it. I love that one.
Me too. And it's a real sleeper. I mean, that one, we did it like 2002 or 3 or something, and it's become a cult favorite. I mean, it's really become a classic. James loved it, so he wanted to meet me. And so he came over with a mutual friend. He was here for like 10, 15 minutes at tops. And I gave him I had a CD of Dead End, so I gave him the disc. And a few weeks later, he was doing a short called Doggy Heaven, which is hilarious, which is a 9-minute short that was written as a prequel to an Xbox release, if you could believe this. And Leigh Whannell plays this kind of jerky guy who's trying to pick up girls in the car and runs into me, who's my car, who has a little dog named Miss Marple. And I wish I had a picture of her, the character, with a big hat and big boobs and a big butt and glasses and a little short wig. And what happens is within the 9 minutes, I shoot him. Because I have a gun in my purse, and they send him to dog heaven by mistake instead of people heaven, and it's hilarious. Check it out. I'm sure it's still on YouTube. It's still out there.
Absolutely, I have to.
Okay, so I met James. I did that. I met James directed me. It was like a day, or I think it was just one day, and I met Leigh Whannell then. I didn't know him either. And another wonderful friend, Mike Mendez, who's one of their friends and who's produced some films that I've done. And not long after that, James called and said, I have a script that I've written with my buddy from Australia, Leigh Whannell, who you met. And we don't have a title for it, but there's a role of a psychic. And I was wondering if you would take a look at it. And he said, we've got offers out to Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne. And he said, I don't know if they're going to take the jobs or whatever, but that's who we're approaching. And literally the next day he called just to let you know, both Rose and Patrick have signed on. And I read the script, and the script was scary. I put it downstairs in the closet. I didn't want to sleep with it in my bedroom. And I remember just reading it and going, the character talks a lot. That's all I really recall. And we ended up shooting it. And there was no real, I came in sort of a third through the movie. The character comes into the film, and that was it. I mean, James said, he said, we weren't sure we should kill you in case there was a second one. And I said, don't worry about it. This one is fine. And sure enough, people, for some reason, even Jason called my manager, and he said, people love Lin's character, and people just love Elise, and like this is with Patrick and Rose and this sort of stellar cast. And somehow people just connected to her. And so in the second one, now they killed me. The second one, I'm in the further, and it's actually, I love the second one. I think Patrick's just great in it and really scary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, boy, I watched it again the other night. He's just great in it. Yeah. And then apparently, again, the numbers kept coming in, and how they track different stuff. And they said, people want to know about Elise. They love Elise. So all I can say is, if Elise is done, I'm fine. You know, I mean, in terms of the character, I hope if she's done the further, I actually have a couple story ideas, but it's not my place right now. I mean, Patrick is going to sort of run with it. They've got a script of some kind, and I haven't actually, I'm not really 100% sure where it's at or what. It won't be for a while because he's going to be busy. But you know, once there's something to release or something, I'm sure they will. But we'll see. I don't know I don't know how little or how much Elise will be in it, what my place will be if I am in it. If I'm not, the fans will be disappointed, I'm assuming, you know, but we'll see. We'll see how it unfolds.
But Lin, I want to thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And seriously, your responses, I love them. They're so insightful. It's just so precious. So thanks very much for joining us today.
Well, your questions are fabulous. Oh. And you're just wonderful. I mean, I totally I mean, you know, it's like, you know, I really totally respond to you, and you've got great energy and beautiful thoughts, and I really enjoyed this interview tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You make me blush again.
Well, go ahead, goddammit. Blush away. It's in color. I see it. You're matching that CD right behind you. There's that little one with the red in it. That's you.
And the next color is blue.
Right. No, that means you're not breathing. Forget that one.
It goes all back to normal, Bev. So.
Really?
Yeah, Lin, have a wonderful day. Thanks again for your time, and hopefully again next soon.
I'm ready. I can't wait till things are better here now because of Biden. I mean,
yes.
Not to get into it, but oh my God.
These were
long years. Oh my God. I mean, it leaves me speechless, literally. But I think we're on a good path. I'm getting my first vaccine on Sunday. I got an appointment, which was really exciting.
Oh, great.
So I hope I should be within 3 weeks at least safe enough. You know, I still will wear my mask and do all that, but that'll be a relief for me, because when I go to the supermarket, it's like COVID city. You know, every vegetable I walk by, it's like you don't really want to touch anything.
So, so weird, yeah.
It is so weird. But anyway, stay well. I hope things are good where you are, and you're just delightful. I really thank you for a beautiful interview.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Lin. Thank you.
I will see you again.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye, Lin. Bye.
Bye.